Okay.
The neighborhoods that are next to, the lots were either pretty big or the thing we were looking at is smaller than I thought.
Well, don't forget that some of those lots, certain areas of the township have sewer and water available, public water and sewer available. If you don't have public water and sewer available, then you have to go with an on-lot septic and an on-lot well. The lot size just went a lot higher because the well has to be a set distance. They call them isolation distances away from your sewer field and et cetera, for obvious reasons, right? You're going to work under the assumption that public water and sewer is available, so you can go with the minimum lot size. Okay. What do you guys think of having those paper copies of the plan? Were they helpful? Were they meh? Kind of like prefer working with a PDF file anyway? No opinion?
Paper's a lot more fun.
Paper's a lot
Easier
more
on
fun.
the eyes.
It reminds you of craft day in school.
Yeah.
It does. You can actually take pieces of like cardboard and kind of sketch on them a layout and cut it out and lay it over it, see what it looks like. So I want to pick back up where I left off on Friday. I'm going to record this and post it. Are there any other questions before I go back into working in Civil 3D? Joy. So you're talking about the square that the restriction lines make? You're talking about this blue square?
So when you set up like the side from the, let's say rear yard.
So here's the rear, here's the two sides in the front.
Yeah, so that corner is the side and the rear. Is that included in the minimum or is that additional area?
This is your lot area. Your lot area is not to your building restriction. Is that what you're asking?
Like, well, I guess you're there, you're not like setting up square.
So each one of these is going to have its own set of building restrictions. And I'm not answering your question, stop it. But what I'll go through and do is I'm going to use the offset command. And then that's my building restriction line layer, the BRL. So I'm going to change everything that I want to be a building restriction line over to that. And then I'm going to trim all of these back. But you don't want to trim back your property. question or still?
I think, well, so I was looking at like the yard minimum, as opposed to like the building.
Building restriction line and side yard and front yard and rear yard, they're the same thing. So building restriction line and yard, same in terms of what the word. I still don't know that I'm answering.
The ultimate.
All the building restriction line is, or side yard or front yard or rear yard, is these are areas where you can't put the building. You can't put the house in here. The house can't go anywhere in here. The house can go anywhere in that space. Okay? Sheds, maintenance buildings, pool house type things, all of those are considered accessory structures. The ordinance has rules and regulations about can a shed go in those side yards. Okay. You don't have to worry about that for what you're doing. Just, be aware of it, out in practice. We good? Okay. So I'm going to pick up where I left off. So these are my lots. Okay. Once I get to this point, right, in the road, so this, that's a curb, and this is the center line of my road. So the road stuff is down under C Road. C Road Center. So there's two types. There's C Road Center and C Road Center N. See how they're both the same line type? You can pick which one you want. I mean, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to go with this one. And all I'm doing is using MA, which is match properties. And it says, say, select source object. That's the thing that you want to change stuff to. Okay. Now, these, where the road ends out here, remember that was called a right of way. Okay. So that is C site right of way. Okay, so I'm going to make that my current layer. And I'm going to change my road lines to that. Now, see how I have two curves or two where the road right of ways intersect? This is one road, this is the other road. Road right of ways typically don't end in a subdivision at a squared off corner. There's usually a radius like the road. Okay, so I think I made the road like a 25-foot radius. Look in the ordinance. The ordinance specifies what all this stuff should be, right? But if I want to fill it this, if I fill it this, the whole tail of this line disappears. So all I'm going to do is break this a little bit so that it's two segments. And you just type the word break and pick one end and the other end. Then fill it. And again, just watch the command line. It's going to tell you the next thing that it wants. I want to tell it a radius because right now the last radius I told it was 25. That was to do this. I haven't checked the ordinance, but I'm going to assume that maybe it's 15. Okay. Select the two things that you want to put a fillet on. Right. And then that's just about a completed intersection. you can go through and you can add your houses, right? Maybe if we have time, we'll do that today. But what I want to do is I want to show you how to lay out property lines going around the curve. Okay. So if I know that my lot has to be, let's say, 100-foot wide, okay, I'm going to do a circle where the center of that circle is the end of the last lot line I'm interested in. And I'm going to draw a 100-foot radius. Okay. So if I'm going around the curve, if I'm on a tangent section, I want it to be perpendicular, right? What is the equivalent geometry going around a curve for perpendicular? Anyone know? Radial, right? Like the spokes of a bike wheel. Okay. So what I'm going to do is do a polyline from the center of this arc to where 100-foot width intersects. So this is 100-foot wide. I drew a line from the center, so it's going to be radial. So now I'm going to extend that line to my outer boundary. Right? And I'm going to trim back and then I keep going around, do a circle, center, extend it, trim it. Good? Did I go too quick there? Okay. Really, the last piece of information you're going to need is going to be your house and your driveway. We'll do that if we have time. But what I want to do today is show you how to label your lot areas and your meets and bounds, the geometry of the lot. Okay. It is all done with annotations. The same way you labeled those contour lines, you're going to label the property lines, the lot areas, right? They're different annotation styles. Okay. What I'm going to do is to do my lot areas and such. I don't need to see my BRS, right? So I'm going to turn those off. And it'll make sense why in a second. So those are my properties, my little lots that I have. So I need to define the geometry of each one of these things, because that's what somebody's going to buy. Okay. So if I go to annotate, see how this command is split into like an upper and lower half? If you select the upper half, you get this table. If you select the lower half, it just gives you information on the command line. Personally, I prefer working with the table. You can choose what you'd like to do. Okay. If you started from that base drawing, there's going to be a whole bunch of styles embedded in this. Because wherever you go, they're most likely going to have their own standards and styles that you're going to choose from. If you had to create all of your own styles from scratch, I'll show you how to edit styles, but to create them all from scratch you're probably never going to need to do that. So the first thing you're going to do, you actually don't have to go in this order. Kind of up to you. Line and curve, you're going to label your lot lines. But before we do that, this is one big long segment, right? Here. These are just the sidelines, but this is broken into 100-foot pieces, right? So if I went to label this right now, it would label the whole length. So what we want is the geometry of just that lot to label, okay? Everybody sees how this is a closed figure. You remember how I told you that there's a bunch of handy little commands, those list file commands, those application commands? They're on the Google Drive. They're under CAD resources. All you do to get to them is type upload. I'm going to show you two commands. Poly area is one of them. Okay. I'm going to load it. I'm just going to load it once. I'm going to hit close. It may give you an error. It may not. The command will still work. Okay. To use poly area, you have to have a closed polygon. Do we have a closed polygon? Not yet, but it's pretty easy to make. So what I'm going to do before I get started is I'm going to make a layer and I'm going to call it lots polylines. Now I'm going to set it current. But if you have a bunch of lines that overlap one another and you go to print that, you're never going to see the line type. But you still want to have that line. Okay. See this column? It's a plot layer. Okay. If you select that and turn it off, it is visible to you on the screen, but it won't print out on the PDF or the paper copy when you go to print. Okay. So I'm going to switch it off because I don't want to print it, but I want it to be able to label my lines and areas. Okay. So I'm going to set that current. So I have this layer, it's red. I want to pick a different color. I'm going to go with like an orangish color or a peach color. Okay. So we have poly area. You also have something called B poly. Stands for boundary poly. Watch what it does. You hit B poly, right? You can either pick a bunch of objects, or I have all of these closed areas, right? If I hit pick points and select a point on the inside of the figure that I want to create an island around, right, or a border around, I'm just going to select inside that lot, and inside this lot, and inside this lot. So you see how it made me polylines? Now something's going on here. Did you notice how on that last one it didn't make it for me? Why didn't it make it for me? It's not closed. So if it's not doing it, if it's not creating that figure for you, it is not a closed figure. So what I've got to do is I've got to extend those two lines. Now, if I go to B poly and pick a point, did you see what it was selecting? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn whatever that layer was off. You notice how that would affect your lot areas? So you got to make sure that the geometry that it gives you is the correct geometry. Now you have a bunch of polylines that are closed that you can label and get areas. Yes, so you could do your lot areas first, or you can go back to annotations. Go to line and curve. So we're gonna label the line and curve. So the label style that we're looking for. See all of these different styles? Right? That's a lot. You can label bearing and distances. You can label the bearing and on bearing over distances, bearings on the top, distances on the bottom. Right? You could stack it. So what I'm going to look for is the one that's stacked either above or below. Crow's feet are little ears, like it will put little ears on the line for you. I'm just going to do bearing over distance, right? And then curve. You can label, you can use a tag number and create a table, or you can label the radius, length, and delta on the line, okay? So I'm going to select add. And when I select add, see how it just labeled the one line? If I want to label multiple, if I select multiple, I got to go in and give it what I want it to do. So I'm going to just do bearing over distance. Now it gives me all of them. Okay. Everybody follow that? Now your labels should go clockwise. Everybody sees how these labels are going in the opposite direction. This is northwest, so it's going this way. This one's northeast, so it's going that way. I want them to read clockwise going around the lot. So all you do is go select it, right? If you hit reverse label, see how it just changed it from northwest to southeast? Everyone sees how this southeast is labeling the correct direction now. This one's wrong too. Reverse, right click, reverse, right click, reverse. Done. Okay. Everyone following so far? Now, you want to label both lines, right? Or both lots. If I label the other lot, am I not going to get overwritten text? What I can do is right next to this style, see this little pull down button? I can edit the current selection. If I edit that, right? It's showing me what it's doing, okay? It's putting the bearing over the line. It's also telling me how tall the text is, right? Under here, right? Whoops. So the bearing, if you select, if you go up here to the component name, if you select bearing, it's telling me that the text type is 0.15. That's a little big for my text. I'm going to make it 0.08. You see how it shrunk all the text? Right? Now it's saying that the attachment point for the text is the middle center of the line. Watch what happens if I change it to top center. Now everything would be to the inside of the line. See that? Now, if I hit apply, you could also hit bottom center. Everybody see when I hit bottom center, it flipped to the side that I want. So I switched it to bottom center. You could switch it to top center. Hit OK, hit close. Now let's say that there's one or two labels that, you know what, I want it on the other side of the line. Just like you can flip on one label the direction that it reads, which is this reverse label, you can hit flip label and it'll move it to the other side of the line. Changing the style changes it global, changes all. Changing the individual one, you just select it, right click, and then flip. Flip switches it to the side of the line, right? And reverse, flip switches to the side of the line, and then reverse flips the, which way the direction reads. Right? Okay. Notice that it put this bearing label on a different layer than my text. If you don't know what layer it's on, you can just go to the style, edit label style, go back in here to edit it, right? That's the label, that's the layer that it's putting the label on. So let's say I don't like that. I don't even know what color that is. It's like a cross between a green and a brown. Okay. But it's C property boundary bearing. Go back home, layer. You can change the color of it to whatever you want. See how it changed it? See how it made my labels a little smaller too? That's going to be helpful for when you have your house on there and your driveway and all the other stuff. How do we label lot areas? I'm going to show you three ways that you can do this. One way is you can just say, I'm going to make a table and do a table in CAD. Right? The other way that you can do it is with mtext, and you can spell out lot 1, so many square feet, so many acres. All right, that's one way to do it. Or we go home. Thank you, Joy. So you can go through and you can create a style and label it with a style. Okay. So you can create parcels from objects, right? So you can go around. See how it just labeled that lot area for me? Lot 1, 18,000 square feet, 0.4132 acres. And that is just going in under parcel, create from object. So you have that polyline, and it's going to create the parcel from polygon. Okay. But it got rid of my bearings. Right. So you'll have to go back and do the lot areas first and then do the bearings. The other thing you could do, right, is just do it manually. And here's where that command that I showed you, you have to do the upload thing and bring in poly area. But if you select poly area and select the line, it tells you that it's an 18,000 square foot lot and 0.413 acres. You could also go to I had to minimize that, so the Zoom was wiping out the ribbon. See where it says inquiry? Right. If I want to use my inquiry tools, I go to inquiry area. Down on the command line, you see where it says object add subtract. I'm just going to type O for object. And then it tells me what the area is. 1,800 square feet. The downside to the area from inquiry is it only gives it to you in square feet. So you got to sit there with your calculator, divide it by 43,560, because there's 43,560 square feet in 1 acre. I like this because what I can do is copy and paste. If you use poly area, it doesn't let you copy and paste, but it's 0.413 acres. So let's talk real quick about precision. So that is done and labeled. Maybe I want my text to be centered. That's up to you. That's a style thing. Maybe you want your text to just be square, or maybe you want it to be parallel to the lot, right? So if you rotate it, pick a base point and then make it perpendicular to something, now it's perpendicular to side lot line, and all the areas are going to be parallel to the lot. What you don't want is when you do your print to have your text upside down, for obvious reasons. Precision. Square foot, no decimal places. Normal rules for rounding. If it's 0.5, round up. It's less than 0.5, round down. Okay. Acreage, only go to 3. Most of the time in surveying, we go to 4, but what you end up doing is you end up having to chase those 4 decimal places. What do I need? I know what the outbound of this whole lot is, right? So when I take all of your lots and I add them up, I should get that total, agree? take it out to 4 decimal places on the acreage, you're chasing that decimal point. So most of the time, what we do is if it's a square lot, we're all big engineers. We can take one dimension and multiply it by another dimension. So you can't hide the rounding because it's gonna have a rounding up or down, agreed? You can't really do that in the lots, especially the lots that are square. So normally where you take out your rounding errors is in the road right of ways. Okay. So somewhere on the drawing, you're going to want to label all of your lots and you're going to want to label your road right of ways. So for this one, right, you see how it looks like a closed thing? For this road here, you're going to draw a line straight across, and that's going to be the area for this, and then from there up is going to be the area for the other. Does that make sense? Yes. So what you're going to do is one of the two roads, and it's usually the major one, right? So this road right away goes straight across, and this one kind of terminates at this one. Follow? Okay. Houses, I'm going to turn everything back on. My house, I want to fit inside my lot. C-site building is what I use for the houses. I'm going to make a polyline. I want my house footprint to be 60 foot by 40 foot for one floor. Okay. There's my house. My house isn't parallel to anything right now. I just drew a box. So I'm going to rotate it. Pick any point you want, and then I'm going to go perpendicular to the front property line, because sometimes my front property lines might not be parallel with my sidelines. Then what you can do is you can decide, I'm going to put it to one corner or another, or most of the time, I'm going to scoot that building back a foot. Why? Why would I want to scoot the building back an additional foot from the VRO? Construction tolerance, right? Let's say that there's a brick ledge on the front of the house or a stone ledge that they want stone instead of siding. Now the stone is out into the front building restriction. Would the zoning officer come out and say something? Well, let's not take the chance. Let's scoot the building back half a foot or a foot and be done with it. Okay. The driveway. Right. So it doesn't look like there's a driveway layer. Well, let's make one. See, site, drive. What color do I want? Seafoam green, because the building's already on. Right, so line. Now, most of the time, so polyline, line. Does the driveway end at the road right of way? No, it goes all the way out to the curb, right? So I just went from the end point perpendicular to the curb. And offset, I want a 2-car driveway, so I'm gonna do 20 feet. Could you have your driveway come into the side of the house?
Yeah.
Absolutely. With this, you really should have everything you need to do your subdivision. When we get back on Monday, I'm gonna go over some helpful other drafting things. But that's it, Chris.
For the variance for the lot outline,
Yeah,
if you're gonna do a lot above the one you did,
yeah.
would you do a new variance for the line of the stairs?
Yeah, so what we'll do is we'll go back in, line curve, multiple. Add, I'm gonna select that line. So now you see how this one's pointed in the wrong direction? So that's what you're gonna have. All right. I didn't do one that had a radius. Let's do one that has a radius. Add. See how that little segment there? It labeled the length, radius, and delta. That's all you really need to label. If that is in the way of something, if you grab the label, you see this little blue button? I don't like where that label is. Wow, look at that. All you got to do is grab it and drag it to a spot where you can. Okay? Same way I edited the text type, you can edit the text type of that style. Okay? Edit label style. Right, so there's two. If the label is on the line, it's under general and layout. Drag state is when you move it off the line. Right? So the radius, you have to go in and you have to tell it for each component. So for the radius, the length, and the delta, you switch it to the height that you want and then hit apply. Okay. Okay. Close. See how it shrunk all the text for me? So in those styles is where you edit the text heights. Okay, I'm gonna go over some helpful drafting stuff on Monday, but you can get the bulk of your project done. You know, if you haven't already started looking at it, you can start working on that. Again, I really wouldn't wait. Okay.